Our world is changing. We have bright days and dark ones. And then there is the unfamiliar pause that gives us just the right space to rediscover what truly grounds us, defines us, connects us, and unites us. Each one of us, everywhere in the world. It is time to connect with all aspects of culture, to meet the artist, to create the ideas, to explore the music right now, in this moment. So go ahead, be culturally curious, and be culturally connected, because culture is for all.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for a very special Cultural Summit live stream. This is a first for me, to be honest with you. I never thought I was going to be talking to a large group on a screen, but here I am, and here we are. Over the last several weeks, there are a few words and a few terms that usually we take for granted. These words and these terms really have gotten a much stronger meaning to me, I think to all of us. And they're simple words. Words like we, words like us, and words like together. These are things that they mean so much today because we're all going to get through this together. We're all going through this together. And I'm sure that when we come out of this, it's going to be united as us. The Culture Summit Abu Dhabi is an annual event organized by the Abu Dhabi Department of Culture and Tourism in collaboration with our major partners, UNESCO, The Economist, Guggenheim Museum Foundation, and the Royal Art Academy, and UNCTAD and Google. And I want to thank everybody who's been a part of the Cultural Summit from its inception to where we are today. We can't have accomplished this and many of the stuff we've accomplished in the past without their help. This really shows our essence of our connectivity and our essence of our partnerships. We are all here today for one greater good, and it is to become beacons of light in the world of culture, to sound what we do to the world, and for the world to listen and to come back right at us. We've seen during these difficult times how powerful culture can be. It is a medicine. It is an aspect of life that we really can't even equate through a science. We've seen people coming out of their balconies and singing and bringing so much joy to the rest of the world. We've seen people basically understand the true power of a book. We've seen people basically get on the internet, on Google Culture, Arts and Culture, and other platforms, truly wanting to understand everything from a painting to a piece of sculpture to what really that piece means to them and to the rest of the world. So this is really our time to really showcase what we do and to make what we do possible for everybody to get in contact with. Going back to the Cultural Summit, each year we brought together world leaders in the worlds of art, media, public policy, and technology to collaborate, brainstorm, and address in concrete ways the role of culture can play in addressing the great challenges of our time, from poverty and extremism to climate change and conflict. We're in another conflict today, and again, basing this on our past, we will get through this together and finding solutions together. This platform was conceived from a strong shared belief in the power of culture, to enact positive change, to inspire and heal, and to support our communities. Therefore, it becomes urgent that during this pandemic, we come together to address this current global crisis. It seems from our shared belief in the pertinent civic responsibility that culture has to play today for all. Culture becomes our means of resistance. It becomes our means of life. And I think that's so important to not just to the heart, but to the mind. It has become apparent to all that we are all interconnected, and this is a global world with united concerns for our humanity. And in this time of great anxiety and isolation, culture provides a sense of purpose and solace. It fosters solidarity and unity. It reminds us we are all human. Creativity and imagination becomes a resource to engage and release the minds of our captive communities worldwide. We gather here today to tackle the urgent questions. on the role of culture in these turbulent times, and to share the models and the ways that culture builds its support and resilience alongside our community. I was thinking earlier this morning when what are we gonna be discussing today, and the questions are we gonna be asking, and the answers that we're all gonna be finding together. One thing that came to mind is that regardless how many questions we asked, and I'm sure the many answers we're all gonna have, all the answers will trickle down to just one. The answer to everything we're gonna be asking today is culture. Is let us broadcast what we do, all of us. Culture is our imagination. Culture is in our heart. It's in our minds. It's in the looks of our children. It's in nature. It's everywhere. Just let's harness that and let's share it. Like many initiatives that had been canceled or scheduled due to the current global health crisis, we had to cancel this year's event, unfortunately. And it was really tough when we had that, because every single year we see people from all over the world, from different cultures, different genders, different races, come here in Abu Dhabi and really come together, hand in hand, to find solutions. You know, there is no bureaucracy when we come to the cultural summit here in Abu Dhabi. There is no different demographics. There is no rich and poor. We're all unified in one platform for a greater cause. So it was disheartening for me not to be able to see all of you here with us in Abu Dhabi. But there are solutions. And I think when we've had the cultural summit in the past, not everybody can fly to Abu Dhabi. But today, I'm talking to people from all over the world. On this esteemed panel, we have people from New York, from Paris, from Geneva, from Dubai, from London. And it's amazing. I'm sitting here in my home and I feel they're with me today. Like I feel all the audience members are with me today. So, like I said, you know, with all what's being said, in this moment, we'll emerge stronger on the other side. So it is with excitement and optimism that I announced that the next edition of Cultural Summit Abu Dhabi is planned for March 2021. And inshallah, we're all going to be there together on the cultural economy and the economy of culture. Until then, I very much hope that you enjoy today's live stream session, featuring the expertise and thoughtful opinions of some of the most brilliant minds working in the cultural sphere today. And I've been extremely lucky to work with many of them. And they have taught me every single time I've sat down with them. They've enlightened me, and I honestly believe they've made me a better person. So I'm very happy and I'm thrilled and I'm honored to share their thoughts with all of you. On this panel, of course, there are my friends, Ernesto Tony, the Assistant Director General of Culture of UNESCO, Alexandra, my friend, Monroe, Samsung Senior Curator of Asian Art and Senior Advisor of Global Arts of the Salman R. Guggenheim Museum and Foundation, Marissa Henderson, Chief Creative Economy, UNCTAD, Rebecca Lyons, Director of Collections and Learning at the Royal Academies of Arts in London, and Melanie Nornaha, Senior Editor, Thought Leadership, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, The Economist, Intelligence Unit from Dubai. I would like to thank Google, of course, as one of our Cultural Summit partners. They have made this live stream possible. Thank you, Google. Our panel today will be followed by some incredible musical talents. And now I'm a bit biased because a lot of these musical talents are going to be broadcasted from Berkeley, Abu Dhabi. But in these four very special performances that have been curated by Berkeley, another one of our partners, the performance will feature musicians connected through the art from around the world, from Berkeley, Boston, Berkeley, New York, Berkeley, Valencia, and of course, Berkeley, Abu Dhabi. In addition to a special performance by Grammy-winning songwriter and Hall of Fame inductee, Desmond Child. So a very exciting next hour with all of you. Thank you again for watching, and let us start our discussion. The topics we will discuss in the panel will address the role of culture during this global crisis from social, economic, and psychological angles. Thank you all for listening, and I'm excited to share with you next. Thank you. So, now I've introduced all of you as the panel, as panels. Please, like I said, let's treat this as a beautiful dinner, sitting side by side, enjoying each other's company. Let's be honest, let's be fun, let's be critical of each other at the same time, and let's really put on a show. So I've broken down this into four parts. The first, which is the past, and it's the impact and culture in crisis. So I'll start off by shooting some questions. To all the panel members, these are not my questions, so don't hate me. So I got these questions from a fantastic list of individuals that have come together and come up with these questions after listening to a lot of our visitors from all over the world. So I start with the first question. These are turbulent times that the world is facing. What is the impact of this global pandemic on artists and institutions? And I'd love to ask that question to Ernesto and to Marissa.
Hi, how are you all? Okay, so we'll begin to say that COVID-19 has hit the culture sector very, very hard. When we think that the pandemic is affecting the entire creative value chain, we are talking about creation, we are talking about production, we are talking about distribution, and finally, to the access. And it's, as you can imagine, it's producing that many, and when I say many, many artists and creators all around the world are not able to make ends meet. If you think that all the informal sector of the culture is right now, most of them isolated and in this situation, you will understand that there is all the gig worker, part-timers, freelancers that today cannot live of the production of this art. So when we think that everything that was happened, because when we see that culture is very present right now in this time, as you explained it, at our home, with children, with the education, with how we can share all this culture. But at the same time, it has fragilized the cultural institution and the creators, the artists. Right now, when we are speaking, we have the data that 89% of all World Heritage sites are closed, partially or totally closed. That means that a lot, not only of audiences or public, but also people and the communities that are living from these sites cannot continue to have the same life that they had. When we spoke about institutions, museums, cultural centers, we are looking that they are losing millions. And when I say millions, millions of revenues. Some of them have announced and are forced to let go some of their staff because they cannot ensure to continue to have them in their team. COVID-19 living heritage without the possibility of the rituals, of the festivals, of the ceremonies to be held. So COVID-19 is really affecting not only developing countries, but also developed countries. And when you see all the proposals that are on the table, you understand that right now we have another issue, is that right now we are using technology, but there is a lot of part of the world that doesn't have this opportunity because they don't have access to the internet. So we have to find new ways with radios, with television, whatever means what we have, because people are needing culture. And that's what we are trying to propose all institutions, intergovernmental or private and public sectors institutions, to find solution, not only for the crisis that we are living right now, but for the post-crisis that will come after the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Please.
So would you let me to add on that? In UNCTAD, we have to first of all talk about the general economic situation worldwide. And in UNCTAD, there are studies that show that actually in terms of economy has been the slowdown of manufacturing in China has really had a terrible disrupting effect in developing countries in particular. And one of the estimates that UNCTAD has done is that it could disrupt, they could result in incredible decrease in exports. And this is I would say one aspect of the crisis that is different from the 2008 crisis is that, for example, in terms of services, in the 2008 trading services, in the 2008 crisis, services trade had been resilient. But in this particular case, and this affects directly culture and creative services, is that the services have taken a big hit. So basically, we have particularly the services such as what we discussed, tourism, hospitality, retail. So while on the one hand there is some the services that are related to the internet, to ICT, actually are the life for all of us now. In fact, the services trade has really impacted in a negative way, and UNCTAD is not optimistic. So it is a very, very difficult situation that will result in a slowdown of the economy, not only for developing countries, but also for developed countries. And the problem that UNCTAD has shown is that, while recently many G20 economies, particularly the most developed economies, have put forward big packages, expansive packages to relieve the economy, make the economy become alive again. This is particularly difficult for developing countries. So it will have a very, very negative effect for developing countries in general, and also for cultural and creative services.
I mean, you're both absolutely right, and I think if there's one thing from a human side that this pandemic teaches us is the very simple fact that we need to be there for our neighbor. We really need to take that helping thy neighbor to heart, whether it's from the United Nations or from other nations. We don't just have to look from within, we have to look outside. And we're lucky that we are seeing that in some places. We are seeing people not just think about themselves, whether it's sending test tools, whether it's sending face masks, whether it's sending basically food. And I think the more that's going to happen, the more we're going to basically move forward together. Sticking to some of the comments that you both said, Ernesto and Marissa, from an economic perspective, many cultural institutions have been faced with real challenges on how to retain staff and remain open. These institutions are on the front line facing the brunt of this crisis economically. How do you deal with such situations? Rebecca and Melanie, please.
Shall I? I'll begin, Melanie, and do come in after. But I suppose I could talk about that a little bit in terms of us at the Royal Academy of Arts in London. We are an association that was founded in 1768 by artists. We continue to be led by artists. We are a registered charity. That means we don't get government funding. And despite our lovely royal title and splendid royal ways, we also don't have funding in that sense to run. So in some ways, we're entirely reliant. In fact, in all ways, we're entirely reliant on revenue generation. And that comes because of our visitors. It comes because of our donors and sponsors, and very much because of what we call our loyal friends, those who become members and who come repeatedly to see us. So it's a huge challenge for us to think about how to retain our friends, how to engage our audiences, and in the absence of any revenue streams whatsoever, we're obviously looking at all the ways that we can to try to minimize the financial cost of that, while also trying to keep the spirit of who and what we are alive. And we're also very much aware that in the grand scheme of things, we're on the front line of culture in the UK, but we are not the front line, because for us that, of course, as with all of us, those are our healthcare workers, our key workers, those who are keeping us alive and safe and well. But at the same time, we are alive when we can engage in these kinds of shared cultural opportunities. We can celebrate that. So So we see it as part of a bigger picture, and it's a very serious one for us right now. Melanie, I don't know if you want to.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to join everyone here on this virtual panel. And I hope everyone watching at home is staying safe. Just to your question, Mohammed, I think from the perspective of the media sector, which I represent, I think we are faring a little bit better than other parts of the culture economy. Of course, there are challenges. We're not able to be on the ground to report. We're not able to do a lot of our field work. We're not able to foster some of that collaboration that comes in an office space. But I think in general, we're still able to conduct our interviews right remotely. And so activity in this sector does not really come to a halt. What's been interesting, I think, for me during this time, it's allowed me to reflect a little bit in terms of the role of journalists and researchers. I think there's never been a more important time for journalism, particularly given the amount of misinformation that's out there. People are glued to their phones and are constantly looking for news updates online or on television. And so there's a really important role to play at this time. And I think the way for the media sector to respond is to continue to deliver a fact-based narrative, and also in a way through the narrative to drive solidarity as opposed to divisiveness. And really, I think that's how we're trying to respond to this.
Absolutely. I mean, I really like both your answers. And if you allow me, Rebecca, there's one thing that I would like to take from you is, you use the word loyalty. And I think in this time, we need loyalty to culture. You're absolutely right that, there are things that basically take the upper hand. Obviously, all the healthcare workers that are doing a phenomenal job around the world and putting their lives on the line to basically keep as much people as safe as possible. But culture, we should not forget, defines us. And, maybe we create something in places around the world where it's basically like it's a fund for cultural loyalty, where whether it is our partners, whether it's our friends, whether it's just everyday people can basically play a part in that fund. My dear friend Alexandra, I have one question for you. What are the further challenges facing museums and cultural institutions in the world today? We talked, of course, about our staff. What else can you basically allude to that you're facing some difficulties today? I think you're on mute.
Great honor to be here, Mohammed. Thank you, my friend.
Let's hear that fantastic voice.
And I also join Melanie and all of you in wishing our viewers safety, health, and empathy. I would say that culture is not in crisis. Cultural institutions, the platforms that we deliver culture, and the artists and performers who create culture, they are the ones in crisis. But if we look, as you mentioned earlier, about the concerts that are happening on balconies and terraces around the world in our great cities at sundown every night, that is a cacophony of empathy. That is culture. And I think what it points to, which is what Ernesto was saying, is despite this enormous global assault on our activity, on our behavior, on our communities, we are recognizing that culture is not only a shared form of, as you said, I love that, but it's also a form of immunity. And what we are all thinking a great deal about these days is immunity. And I also want to remind us that it is not the first time that global events with a hard economic impact cultural institutions have that we've experienced. Of course, it was 9/11, which impacted tourism, impacted travel dramatically around the world in the museums, especially those in major urban centers. The 2008 financial crisis, all was a major blow to our endowment, to travel, to tourism, to the public who, as Rebecca says, are the lifeblood of our revenue. So I think we need to see ourselves not in this single moment of crisis, but more as part of one moment, one historic moment in a very actually resilient history. We need to be nimble, we need to be imaginative, we need to be responsive, and I think more than the others I cited, we need to be responsible. What one legal scholar called we need to practice the ethics of withdrawal. So I think to speak specifically about the Guggenheim, I don't think there's any single impact that this economic crisis and public crisis has on our museums, because museums operate so differently in different countries. So the United States and, of course, the Royal Academy itself is rather unique in the UK system. We are entirely dependent on a private philanthropy, on what we call the gate, the public, and our endowment, and the funds that endowment generates. Unlike major museums across Asia and Europe, and indeed in the UAE, which are largely or entirely state funded, and of course those institutions have their own set of issues, but I'm going to be speaking of those institutions like the Guggenheim that are entirely private. So we depend, so what we're facing is a dramatic decrease in funds against our annual budgets, which impacts our program, and those endowment revenue are coming as, again, from the gate, from the endowment, the value losses in our endowment funds, and also our philanthropists. The support that Rebecca mentioned, they might be choosing right now to give to, for example, a medical system. How can we argue against that? So I would say our greatest challenge, Mohammed, is to stay relevant, to be relevant, and to find new ways of being relevant to the moment. And I would actually say, as one of us said earlier, and what Melanie was saying in terms of journalism, our role is perhaps more poignant and more necessary. We need to serve our communities in new ways. Of course, we're learning to move to virtual online programs and gatherings across all the economic divides and class divides that we were mentioning. And I think most importantly, we need to curate what that we are developing in rapid fire ways online to offer the experience of art as solace, as inspiration, as reflection, to curate our content to respond to this extraordinary moment of global solidarity and shared trauma. And within that, we also have to find a way to support artists.
That's fantastic. And I think, your answer definitely gives us a gateway to the next set of questions. But before that, listening to all of you, I think, and moving on to part two of our discussion, which is basically built around cultural resilience. How do we really build cultural resilience? All of us have, within our institutions, within our organizations, and we've seen many organizations around the world that have been focusing over the last several weeks on initiatives on how they can move culture forward. And I think that's also very special to see. I can specifically talk to you guys about the Department of Culture and Tourism. Yesterday, we launched our virtual platform, which is Culture for All. And it's a platform that is accessible on all kinds of on social media, on our website, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a platform that will allow people to be heavily engaged in our world of culture. So it's educational. It is a place where people can meet each other, where artists can meet artists, where people can meet artists, understand from them. It's a place where you can show your work, show your craft, and vice versa. So it's really a place where we'll connect people together. That's one initiative that we're working on. I'm sure there's thousands of initiatives around the world, but they're all being done again for a greater cause, and that's why we're all here. So again, building on the building cultural resilience, I also have a nice set of questions for everybody. We'll start off with Ernesto. What is the role of culture in this crisis, and how can we adapt? How can we evolve?
Well, first of all, to understand, I'm agree that it's not the culture that is in crisis, but the creative economy will enter in a bigger and in a scale that we never lived before, because it's becoming global, and that's the first time. We had some troubles 2011, 2008, we know, but at this time it's affecting everywhere and every type of institution, that are small, big, the biggest institution that we know. But at the same time, it's also, and I'm very optimistic, not with what's happening in my life. I think that this epidemic has given us also something new, as you said before. It has allowed us to go in a new world of technology that allows us to come to a larger audiences. It gives the opportunity to see people that normally in a discussion will say, no, I have no issue with cultural aspects of my life. And they are singing on the balcons, playing music, showing theater, dance from the windows and balconies. And that's something that allows us in the culture sector to be ensuring that at the end, what is important in our life, in our communication, is about our identity, as Mohammed told us before. So this new adaptation of new technology has allowed us also to see how billions of people that are physically separated from one to another can get together using technology and allowing new generation to understand what is culture, the importance of the culture in a living day life. And it will give us also opportunities to rethink how we are using the technology, how museums are using it, how cultural centers. But what is important, and it will be part of the crisis, the post-conflict crisis, is to understand that everything that you see in this technology and your laptop is created by somebody. And right now, these people are giving it for free. It's the way that culture, artists and creators are trying to help the society. As our health carers, we are trying to do with the instrument that we know how to give it to the society. But at the same time, cannot not say that after the crisis, we have to think how all these artists will continue to survive doing this creation. And that's a discussion that we have to do, because at the end of the day, when governments and all public policy will put in place for the end of the crisis, the economic crisis that will come after the health crisis, well, and you know very well that the culture sector goes always at the end. And right now we have to think and to try all together to build something, as some of the governments are doing it right now, to give the tools to get of this crisis more stronger and more resilient. And that's why, and we'll speak after this, we are launching tonight one of our programs with creators, with a movement of debate that it's called Resiliart of UNESCO, and with the SASEC and all the Society of Authors, because we are sure that resilience is part of the solution of the crisis that we are living right now.
That's a fantastic answer, Ernesto. I think you were just missing one thing. I was picturing you holding a flag of culture and waving it while you're basically saying that, because it's really beautiful and very powerful what you're saying, and I think should be listened by a whole lot of people. Moving on to Alexandra Force from the Guggenheim and Marissa from the United Nations. What are the innovative ways that artists and culture institutions are doing to respond to the current situation? And how are culture institutions preserving and moving forward? And what are the innovative methods at hand for these museums?
Thank you. I can give you some good news, which is over the last 3 weeks, it has worked very nimbly to produce some new content, but also to repurpose our content and put it out across all of our social media channels and also on our website. And we are reaching audiences at unprecedented scales. On our website over the past 3 weeks, users have increased 68%, sessions have increased 67%, page views have increased 98% to just under 1 million page views. We're one of the top 5 digital platforms among the major museums in the world, but even these statistics are extraordinary. Audio plays, our podcasts have increased by 355%. Solitude is good, actually, for some forms of cultural consumption we're learning. And the average session duration has increased by over half. So what does this tell us? I think that museums are responding very quickly and nimbly to the mandate to retain, feed, provide solace to our communities. But I'd like to just lend a kind of personal reflection on all of this, Mohammed, which brings us to our work with you in Abu Dhabi as well, which is I've been thinking a lot about globalization. This is called a global crisis. It's called a global pause. It's called a global medical crisis, global health crisis. We are now entering this sort of third decade within a predominantly negative view of globalization, a negative series of attacks in the academy. We've seen it with political movements that have attacked the neoliberal post-World World Order and the sort of capitalist underpinnings and all the ideology that attends that as evil, as unequal. And it's been a very divisive, very rich, but also very divisive 2 decades across discourse, across protest, and we see it in the rising populist political parties, etc. We see it in the use of the digital media that we're using so creatively now to spawn, as Melanie said, a great deal of misinformation. And at the core of this, I would say it's been a culture of divisiveness that we're all been witnessing and been on both sides of for a long time as in my case, a major museum. But I think this moment has shifted our understanding of globalization to not as something negative or destructive or something to be violently, but actually as shared humanity. This is a moment where we are remembering something fundamental, something elemental, and something existential, ontological, which is our shared humanity. We are all human beings. This disease, as Ai Weiwei says, is democratic. It does not know a map. It does not know what class or race you are. It does not know what country you're living in. So I would like to take this moment that we're living in, where people and artists are showing up in ways that are fully present, that are vital. Dancers in the Trisha Brown Company doing reviving a dance from the 1970s we read about yesterday on their own rooftops around the world and streaming it live as a dance event. We're using new technology in ways to support the ecology and urgency of contact, not promotion, not entertainment, but contact. And I think it's also just reminding us that culture cannot be decoupled from society and from community. It's not an industry. It's not an entertainment. It's not a commercial venture. It is encounter.
I love that. I love that. Can I steal that from you?
Yes.
It is an encounter. Marissa, what's your thoughts?
Thank you. Sorry. I just wanted to add to that it is true there is an optimism UNCTAD has this month published a report on the digital economy, and it's shown that demand for the digital economy has never been greater, and that the report also shows that we are using the internet not only to go to school and to work, but we're also using it to be entertained. So all the services related to ICT will have some light. However, we have to take into account that the creative jobs, the jobs in creative industries, are some of the most vulnerable. So building resilience for that and protection for creators will be very important. It will be also important to when we go back for artists go back to traveling and doing tours and shows. It's important that we keep the frontiers open. It's important that we keep the flow of trade and goods and services to rebuild the economy. So that will be very important. UNCTAD is also tracking the effect of the global pandemic on creative industries, and we have been very encouraged by the fabulous resilience and creativity of people. And just some of, I'm sure you know, but some of the artists, singers like Chris Martin and John Legend are doing concerts over the internet from their home. There are some there are also, I think, you can stream the Globe to Shakespeare for free. There are also many companies that are, I think some news companies have put lots of information for free over the internet. So there are initiatives that the ones you mentioned, Mohammed, that we can actually take, and that would be very, very important to do, to continue doing. So I just wanted to mention some of the examples, but I'm sure you have your stories to tell as well.
Thank you, Marissa. I mean, I was going to give you a live concert of my singing, but after you said, John Legend, I didn't want to make him look bad, so we'll keep John Legend where he is. But going back to Rebecca and Melanie, so many institutions have been racing to appear online with their programs. What are the merits and the failures of this presence?
Thank you. Yes, I think for us it's been a rush to consider the preeminence of that in the midst of this crisis. And I would have said, as with all creativity, of course, creativity is not just the artist. Creativity is the digital producer. It's the technology. There's creativity. One of our biggest messages, I think, that we often try to discuss is that creativity exists in all of what we do across the different sectors. So there's been a wonderful kind of flexibility and adaptability as we try to think about how to reach our audiences and how to engage them. I just wanted to pick up on Alexandra's use of that word resilience, because interestingly, we have an art school at the heart of the Royal Academy. We actually have the Royal Academy schools. And our president, who is a practicing artist, uses that word resilience repeatedly, because it's something you learn as an artist as well, that you learn the failure of something, you learn to try and for it not to work out the way you wanted it to, and to adapt it and to try again. And that kind of resilience that comes along hand in hand, if you like, with imagination, I think is something that will see us through in all sectors, not just the cultural sector. Equally, that's the words that I'm hearing a lot from colleagues, that I'm using a lot myself: flexibility, adaptability, being nimble. And those are qualities that we seek in our cultural leadership, but we also see that in what's being produced online in terms of digital content. The final thing I just wanted to say about digital content, of course, is that it's so important for us that art is something that engages and that is collaborative. And I think it's really difficult sometimes to find a kind of digital content that isn't purely delivery based. It's not just me telling you about the paintings in our wonderful permanent collection or us showing you our Picasso exhibition online, although you can do both of those things. It's the use of social media to get you to talk back, to engage you on our Twitter, to draw something and post it back to us. And it's that group coming together that is more challenging, that reminds us that there are many people in isolation most of the time. But how do we try and get that group spirit and engagement? Melanie, sorry, I'm going to hand over to you for your thoughts as well.
No, that was absolutely lovely. And I think it's really commendable how institutions around the world have given the public access virtually during these times. I think I do want to build on your last point a bit, Rebecca, about the challenges with doing this digitally. I think there are some real shortcomings that we do need to acknowledge. Our virtual tour is able to recreate the same awe and inspiration that you feel when you're in that space physically. When you're looking at the Sistine Chapel, is it the same virtually as it is standing below that beautiful ceiling? So there are things like this that we do need to acknowledge. Even the serendipity of walking through a museum and encountering something you didn't expect to. So I think these are important to recognize. I think there are technologies that are helping with this. There are more sophisticated ones that can deliver 360-degree videos. But again, these will be available to a handful of large institutions with good funding. These are not tools available to all institutions. So again, important, I think, to recognize these sorts of challenges when we're thinking about what the new cultural economy looks like.
I mean, everybody here is absolutely right. And it reminds me of last year's Cultural Summit, when a lot of discussions was, how can we make sure that culture actually is for all? Where people from all over the world can enjoy everything we talked about right now, whether it's the Sistine Chapel or the Mona Lisa at the Louvre, Paris, or whatever is at the Met or at the Guggenheim, or even the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. So what we've seen lately is how fast we have moved in 1 year and how this pandemic has actually accelerated this specific point. And I think it's only going to evolve moving forward. I think many of the things we talked about specifically in this part is when we come out of this, one thing that we need to learn from, because obviously this is a learning curve for everybody. There's going to be things in the future that will come. It's how we're going to basically be resilient to them. Right now we're in the situation, but others will come. So one of the things we need to make sure is that whatever comes in the future, we need to make sure we have the tools to future-proof culture. That the stuff that we're discussing today, have been discussed and have solutions if need be in the future. So we do not have the same problems we're facing today in the future. At the same time, when it comes to the world of content creation, I think all of you are absolutely right. Right now, we are digesting content everywhere. And I think we can't, we're asking for more and more and more and more, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, but we're taking it all in. And I think there's no harm in having that much content. But when we specifically talk about cultural content, I just want to go back to what Rebecca said. I think what's imperative for us is to make sure that whatever we're digesting, we have the opportunity to link back, to connect back to the artist, connect back to the art piece, connect back to each other. And I think this is where I think the evolution of this virtual world will take us. So obviously this leads us to the future. And, we want to discuss in the next part is the future and how it's redefining the cultural landscape, how the future will define the cultural landscape, how the future will define our economy of culture, and how the future will be a supportive aspect of culture and creative industry. So we previously in our discussions, we touched on social economic implications of this pandemic on our culture institutions. Let's spend a little bit more talking about the entire 360. So again, I'll start with Melanie there. And so if we look at the future scenarios, what future scenarios that you see on the cultural economy and its practitioners?
I think a lot of it will, I think a lot of it will depend on how this pandemic will really pan out. I think there's a lot of uncertainty about that at the moment regarding testing, not knowing the number of cases that are out there, with a vaccine also being a far way away. And we don't know how long this lockdown period will last. There are sort of encouraging signs from some countries that were hit pretty early. But I think institutions in the culture economy, to truly be prepared, I think we need to prepare for a scenario where we're expecting a prolonged period of lockdown, or at least short periods of lockdown, but perhaps more frequent periods of lockdown. I think it's important to think about that when we're crafting our strategies to build resilience in this sector. I am, however, optimistic about the power of human ingenuity that really supports and drives the sector. So I do believe that in this crisis, we will deliver solutions that we can use to address these challenges. But I think it's important to be realistic about the possible scenarios for this pandemic.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. And for Alexandra and for Ernesto, how will the cultural landscape be impacted post-crisis?
There's no question that, speaking for museums, that our attendance will be reduced. Tourism is obviously going to be impacted for the near to long future. The ability to do large-scale international loan shows might also be impacted. So I think you're going to see a shift in programming. I think the real difference is going to be what we might call the metabolism of our programming, of our exhibition schedule. That said, I think our symposia, lectures, the full ecology of what a museum does will be up and running in full stream very quickly after our doors reopen. You know, museums are not only galleries with things on the wall to see. There's so much that goes on with education, with teaching, with sending artists into public schools, with working with artists on commissions for the years to come, and of course our ongoing research for future shows. All of that is ongoing now and will be into the future. I said the Guggenheim, we're also very much positioning ourselves in this massive, extraordinary cooperation with the government of Abu Dhabi in the future Guggenheim Abu Dhabi. And I feel that a lot of the experience that we've been sharing together over the last several months will inflect some of the programming in the way that we approach the future museum. And I think that will make us more empathetic, more culturally intelligent, and more attuned to the kinds of imagination and creativity to foster among our communities, among our region, and internationally. And I'd just like to close with something that a message from our director, Richard Armstrong, to all of you. And he said the commitment of every person to an empathetic and balanced world must continue in the face of insurmountable odds. Our respect for and inquiry into the achievement of our societies are a full demonstration of the new world can live and flourish cooperatively. Of course, the art of our time will be at the center of this new order. Inshallah.
Ahmed, if you allow me.
Inshallah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I can assure.
Mohammed, please.
Go ahead, Ernesto. No, I was just going to say
sorry.
It was beautiful what you said. So go ahead.
Okay. So sorry to interrupt you. According to the UN trade agency, the UNCTAD, the COVID-19 is likely to cost the global economy more than $1 trillion during 2020. And in the industry and in the creative economy, as a global impact that it's showing, it's more than $7 billion in the film industry. Or we see big company like Cirque du Soleil who had let go 95% of its workforces as a result of this pandemic. Or the book publishing industry in Italy estimate the loss of more than 80,000 works that will not undergo publication in 2020. So crisis is enormous and it will completely change our landscape. We have the opportunity to remake the cultural landscapes in order to address some of the issue of the inherent vulnerability of artists and cultural professionals and technicians also. We need to rethink the labor and social protection frameworks surrounding artists, to rethink way of financing culture in order to make it a little bit more resilient to crises. We will encourage countries to ensure that artists can continue to access global markets, and all these new technology will help to do this. But at the same time, we have to ensure that they are fairly remunerated for their work. We need to rethink how to promote access to culture for countries and communities that have limited access to the internet, to ensure that diversity, and that's very important. We're in charge of the 2005 Convention about diversity of expression, cultural expression. We have drive both online and offline the access to the culture. So it will change everything that we know, how we rethink tourism, and to do it in a more sustainable way. The cultural heritage sites, how we safeguard them, knowing that today they are closed. So we have to find response and solution to COVID-19. And we cannot do it alone, each one of our institutions. It's an international, intergovernmental issue where private, public sectors, creators, producers have to play a bigger role in giving examples, ways of doing things, and proposals that are being putting on the table. So we hope that we will be able, in a very short time, to have all the information to put recommendation so that we can build something in the future that will help all the economy around the culture. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, hearing both of you, I think there has to be a movement for cultural diversification. I think all our craft has to be a little bit more sustainable, and we need to look at all our ecosystem and how we can use our surroundings to make our culture a little bit more resilient and more sustainable for the future. Moving to Rebecca. Rebecca, what are the initiatives to safeguard artists and freelancers or freelance creative practitioners?
I think a lot of this in the current situation is really just being worked out at very granular local levels. So certain governments able to support better than others, certain schemes to help those whose freelance creative practice is so very kind of perilous in this kind of moment. I think as we go forward and as we try to think about ways to safeguard our creatives, that really we can do what we can on our local levels. We can do what we can to champion and celebrate creativity by, drawing pictures and putting them up in our windows for our neighbours, right the way through to lobbying and influencing at high political level for policymakers to engage with creativity in the creative industries as something that is not the icing on the cake. It is not a luxury. It is not some sort of bolt on to the rest of society, but something that actually fuels and drives a lot of society. And I would also add that in the midst of all of that, making sure that creativity is championed and celebrated in our education systems as well. and that our teachers feel that those sorts of skills that we've discussed, the flexibility, adaptability, resilience, and imagination, are the sorts of skills that are important that they're life skills, and they come so often through that idea of creative practice and creative engagement. So I'd say we can lobby at the highest sort of policy levels, and we can also do everything we can in collaboration with wonderful supportive partners such as you and the Guggenheim and UNESCO, and all the different ways that we can reach out to one another. So global and local.
Absolutely, Rebecca. And thank you so much for that, because obviously today and tomorrow and the day after, we're all going to be together under this support system. We're all going to be supporting each other. You know, we're all going to be the shoulder for each other, and that's the way we're going to get through this. Another important aspect that you talked about is education and teaching. Now, I have always been a strong advocate of our sector being a major component of our curricula in schools. It is creates this creative mindset that is much needed in the world today. And I think just as important as the maths and the sciences, the arts and the arts are just as important, and they need to be an integral part. And that in itself will create a ripple effect to make sure that this industry continues to be protected moving forward. And I think just a point that I want to say, because obviously you've touched on the aspect of teaching. I think all of us want to take a second to thank all the teachers around the world for all their effort and all their hard work. I think we've all seen how difficult it is while we're teaching our children. They are really superheroes, and we thank you. We really can't thank you enough. Moving forward to the United Nations, of course, and Marissa, I want to ask you, how do you think we foster social participation and public engagement in order to further support our communities?
Thank you, Mohammed. I think to move forward, we need to lay the foundations for a strong, sustainable, and culturally sustainable recovery, economic recovery. So that we will need, to take the fiscal and monetary policies, but trade will be very, very important element in this recovery. As our Secretary General, Dr. Mukisa Kituyi said, let's keep ships moving, ports open, and cross-border trade flowing. And I think we also need to foster an environment for the business, favorable for the business, which will also be important to encourage renewed investment. Now, I think from what I hear from what you're saying, is important that we come together, and I think countries will have to come together to find ways out of this dramatic situation. So international cooperation will be crucial, and I think we have an element that we can use, and that is the International Year of Creative, the resolution that was approved by the United Nations on the declaring 2021 the International Year of Creative Economy. In the resolution, we show that the creative economy, creative industries are very important, not only for job creation, but for the soul, but also for job creation, for the economic as a tool for economic development. And so I think we need to use this opportunity and celebrate next year together, and with not only governments but with key institutions like the museums and NGOs. So let's think about it.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. It's all about collaboration and coming together when it comes to this. Moving forward, obviously we move to the fourth part of our discussion, and it's really the part where I want you to really freestyle. And it's our call to action. What do we really want to say? And how you want to respond to this. So what is your manifesto, your short manifesto when it comes to this? From my perspective, I mean, we all here believe in the power of culture. And it's here to make a difference, and it's to actively consolidate our cohesiveness in front of any adversity. It's our responsibility toward the cultural industry to make sure we can join the efforts to support the industry. So therefore, again, I would like to share. This is my call to action, and I want to hear your call to action. Jump in when you feel like you want to say something, but I want to hear from all of you.
I'll leap in a little bit with some of what we've been thinking about, which is simply just to encourage all of our viewers to join in, to get involved in whatever ways that you can with creative projects. And that may be if you're a maker, you want to make things, but you might just want to think about them as well. You might want to reflect, you might want some slow looking. And we need to bear in mind all of our audiences as widely as we possibly can, but to continue to say to everyone that culture and art is for you. It is made for you, it is made by you, and that I'd love to see us be able to break down some of those barriers to culture and some of that isolation actually that existed even before COVID-19. To those who felt that certain types of culture perhaps were not for them. So I'd love it if this was a way that we could increase a kind of democratic participation in whatever ways people felt they could participate in arts and creativity.
Mohammed, if you allow me to intervene.
That's beautiful. Culture made for you. I like that.
If you allow me,
Yes, Ernesto, go
first
ahead.
of all, thank you to bring us together, because in this right moment, what we need is what is happening right now with culture that brings us together, that makes us stronger and resilient, as we talked before. And at the same time, it's a way of resistance also to bring with our children, with our future generation, how to understand a phenomenon like this pandemic that we didn't imagine 3 months ago. At the same time, I want to use this opportunity also to introduce and to announce that UNESCO is launching tonight in Paris Tower a new campaign that is called Share Our Heritage. And it's around many steps. One is the mapping that we are updating every day about the impact of the COVID on the World Heritage sites around the world. That is important. At the same time, we are launching in partnership with Google Arts and Culture um, uh, through an online exhibition of more than 60 World Heritage sites property with 3D dimension to help also to understand what is World Heritage sites and why it is so important for humanity. We are also sharing stories about site managers that are right now in these sites where there is completely alone and they can show what is the living heritage around. We are trying to push kids from 6 to 12 years to draw on their favorite World Heritage sites, to involve them. A lot of them are in holidays right now, so we want to push new generation to understand why we need these spaces that belongs to all. But at the same time, and that I wanted to share, on 15 April, we will launch this Resiliart debate with goodwill ambassadors and great artists as Jean-Michel Jarre, where we'll bring together key industry actors and artists. And that's what I wanted to say, to see what is the impact and how civil society with actors can present some solution. And for ending, on 22 April, we will have all the Ministry of Culture of the whole world together once again to discuss about what are the solutions that we can bring at the policy levels for now, but most important, for the future, to involving all the society in the solutions that we need. So be with us, share our culture, and participate in every way that you can.
I can jump in if I can be heard over the music. I think what this also reminds us.
Yeah, I know. I think there's a party going on for you.
Shall I go on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. One of the topics that we were going to be discussing, Mohammed, in the Culture Summit 2020 that was to be held now in Abu Dhabi is the need for collaboration among the larger institutions, the better funded institutions, and those small activist, underground, but nonetheless extremely essential institutions and platforms, be they art spaces or performance spaces that are part of the fabric of culture, both locally and globally. And I feel that coming out of this, institutions were already seeing a tremendous amount of solidarity, of collegiality, of working together on policies, on announcements, on staffing, approaches to staffing during this crisis. Uh, we're working to appeal to our federal government for funding during this crisis, including, if we need to, the furloughs of our staff. But I think going beyond that and building on this new sense of solidarity among museums and institutions that we see, we're going to need better funded institutions, the larger institutions, to figure out a way to cooperate with the larger ecology and the sort of to make it less vertical, the cultural ecology around the world. I think what we have a sense of now that might be new that we can take forward is a sense of collective survival for the institutions that serve not only our communities and our publics, but also serve and celebrate and provide learning around the artists in our midst and the art past. I also just want to mention one thing that my colleague Vivian Green, senior curator at the Guggenheim, has discussed internally at the Guggenheim, is that perhaps we could have some kind of memorial for those in the art world who have fallen as of the COVID crisis, much as the art world did around those who fell from AIDS. I think we do need to emerge with some kind of collective memorial to recognize the enormous talent that has been lost to the world and how we can keep it in a new world. Whereas Richard said, art will be the center of the new order.
You're absolutely right. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think definitely we need to basically pay homage to everybody that's lost somebody during this pandemic, whether it is somebody from our cultural creative world or somebody else. I mean, everybody played a part in the cultural DNA of this world. Okay, so I think we've heard from everybody on their on their call to action and what we all should be doing and taking advantage of the opportunities that are ahead of us, because as we all know, these times do create opportunities. This opportunity for us all talking together is an opportunity. And the next one that I would like to announce after listening to everybody here, is the formation of a task force, a sort of think tank with additional partners like yourselves and more, who will reach out to in order to monitor the situation and provide the analysis and studies needed to support the cultural creative industries. The cultural institutions will need to respond to the post-pandemic situation, and they will need to redefine who we will be and how we would react to the transformation. Our task force will support them through this task. And I think that I would need everybody's intellectual minds, everybody's effort for us to come out collectively on solutions for all. I leave the floor now for some questions that I believe we're going to be getting through WhatsApp. Hopefully this goes as smooth as possible. So is somebody going to be leading on to these questions? Have we received them? Any questions? Okay, so it does seem like that we have It seems like we were extremely thorough and robust. So obviously we're all some fantastic teachers. Nobody has the questions. Our audience, I hope, listened, and I hope made their asked their own questions through with themselves, and hopefully we've given some answers or at least some thought to some of your questions. I will leave the floor for anybody here who wants to give one final thought, and I will lead that. I think listening to everybody here, there was some, it was beautiful, it was human, it was real. And just want to basically highlight some of the things that I've heard from each and every one of you. So we've heard things about this is an aspect of shared humanity. I want to add to that, it's also shared cultural universality. We've heard that culture is an encounter. And I think in hearing that, it just cements that culture is a part of our human essence. Culture has to be interactive, whether it's today or for the future. We've always felt, how do we react to a piece of music or a object or an artifact or a piece of art or a piece of intangible heritage? I think we need to react to it. And I think technology can help us react to it better than we've ever done in the past. And of course, last, culture is ever evolving. But one thing we've learned today, that it's also a constant. And I think that's something very special for us. And just in the words of you, culture defines us. So we should really commit to it. That's my final words, and I want to hear from you now.
Nobody wants to speak. I will take the floor.
Ernesto, Rebecca, Alessandro.
Please, what is important in this really complicated time is everybody who has children, who has been in touch, trying to teach our children the last 2, 3, or 4 weeks. It's so important to be ensuring that we can express the value of the importance of culture, heritage, arts as a whole, as part of our identity, our integrity. And also what I heard many times today in this summit is the ethical point of view, what we have to do, how we express ourselves, and how we think that each time that we see an artist, a creator, we have to think that he's living of this creation, and we have to find a way that society recognize it and give the fair value to this creation. So please, for the future, post-crisis, think about it, because our next generation, our future generation, will be congratulate us if we do well the job after this crisis. So be safe, share culture, share our heritage.
Beautiful, beautiful. Anyone else?
I just very quickly say that as someone who is a historian of art, we so often look back on the great golden eras of artistic production, and I think they so often fall into two different types of era. One is that of plenty, of wealth, of money flowing in that gives rise to creative production and supports creative industries. But the other one is times of adversity. And often that kind of resilience and reaction to what Bertolt Brecht talked about as the dark times, what we might think of as the difficult times, can also historically sometimes lead to great outpourings of creativity and of that kind of shared engagement as well.
I would like to read something, Mohammed, if I may.
You're absolutely right.
I reached out to some of our panelists.
Please do.
Who were planning to come to the Culture Summit in Abu Dhabi now, and asked them to send me readings. Like, what are you reading now? What resonates? And this is less a call to action than maybe a call to inaction, and the kind of solace and strength that we can find in inaction. And the artist Ryan Tabet, who is actually in the collection of the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi, Lebanese-born artist who lives between Lebanon and San Francisco, sent me an essay by the artist Etel Adnan. And it is called "To Be in a Time of War." And I'll just want to read you the first paragraph, if I may. She writes, "Nothing, do nothing, mark time, to bend, to straighten up, to blame oneself, to stand, to go toward the window, to change one's mind in the process, to return to one's chair, to stand again, to go to the bathroom, to close the door and open the door, to go to the kitchen, to not drink or eat, to return to the table, to be bored, to take a few steps on the rug, to come close to the chimney, to look at it, to find it dull, to turn left until the main door, to come back to the room, to hesitate, go on, just a bit, a trifle, to stop, to pull the right side of the curtain, then the other side, to stare at the wall." And in a way, I think this is how we're all feeling in our quarantine, in our homes, wherever or however they may be. But I think the action, again, is a call to use this time of inaction to reflect deeply on the meaning of culture and the meaning of our lives and the meaning of art and the solace and inspiration and wisdom that art throughout the ages in any form can give to us at this moment of humanitarian crisis. And in closing, I want to offer my enormous thanks to the medical workers around the world who are working against extraordinary, insurmountable, historically unprecedented odds to keep our societies at this time of crisis. And thanks to the government of Abu Dhabi and to Mohammed and the DCT for convening this, which allows us to feel a sense of community and connection at this time of hibernation and isolation.
I just want to
thank you so much, Alexandra. That was beautiful. That was
also beautiful. Thank you. I think Abu Dhabi has shown a true leadership in the culture and creative industries, and I thank you for this opportunity. I love how you call it, alone together. It's just really wonderful effort, and I really hope that next year in the 2021 Abu Dhabi summit, the circumstances will be very different, and we will be able to share more positive news together. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's truly been an honor moderating this panel. It's my first panel to moderate, so let me know how well I did. I can take criticism, don't worry. But again, it was an honor. It's been a pleasure. And to everybody on this call and everybody listening to us, please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy. Thank you.